I'd say hello, gorgeous faces, but we're starting a tiny bit early, and we've got our one of our favorite guests, Barbara, here. Barbara is the queen of quirky questions, and I encourage quirky questions. So if anyone has any questions, they will, hello, Barbara, they will post it in the comments and I'll feed it at some point during the call. And don't worry, nothing too scary. So, Joseph Reid, let me tell you the story behind Joseph Reid. I got a book from Tantor, and it was just, if anyone, you work with the publishers, they send you books and it becomes your full-time job. So, another book from Tantor, a gorgeous cover, type of genre I like, and that's as much I put it in my schedule, and that was it. And then you also do reach outs, and I'd said to them, oh, can I look into this book? The author said to tell you, author has narrator approval. And I got turned down for that book. But the day which is also a part of our job, we don't even notice. But the day they had turned me down from that book was the first day I'd started recording The Lockbox. And I told a few friends, I'd sent a few messages, kind of in shock, because I had never experienced a book like this. Because in most books, some books have more action and more fast-paced scenes than others. But this book was every single minute, it kept that pace up, that taut, thriller, edge of your seat pace, but it was every single minute. And you overlaid the characterizations, because I would have, until I'd done your book, I would have thought it was impossible to also, because normally in books, there's the tense action scene, and then there's the buildup of the characters. You did it all at the same time with crazy detail, which brings me to research, which I want to know about. But so I remember the day they let me know that I didn't get the other book. I can't remember the name of it. I was like, what? Who? I was in the world of Joseph Reid's writing, and
Awesome.
it was amazing. It was quite a feat. So tell me about 10-year-old Joseph.
Um, 10-year-old Joseph. So I was a Navy brat, so I moved all over the place. Jumped from school to school. So 10-year-old, I would have been, I don't know, like in elementary school or something. So I was probably in school number 3 or number 4, something like that. I grew up as an only kid, and so reading was a very, big part of my life. Um, I devoured, mysteries and stuff. Yeah, started like I started with the Hardy Boys kind of thing.
Classics.
And moved on, and Sherlock Holmes, and kind of moved on from there. Um, but yeah, it was books and comic books, and that was a big chunk of my life. And but frankly, I was always going to be a research scientist. I was going to study sharks, because that's what I grew up wanting to do. And I started down that path, and we can talk about that if you want. But that was kind of always the plan. I was going to be a scientist. I like reading, and we went from there.
Were you, I mean, you were like obviously a bright kid. I mean, you had to have been a bright kid, because you can't have had the careers that you've had, without being
I did okay.
quite
Yeah, I did
quite
okay in
bright.
school.
So
Yeah.
were you ambitious, or were you a dreamer? I mean, what were you anxious as a child?
Um, I was the I was the ambitious, driven, um, cocky, angry, kind of kid. So eventually I went to boarding school. I went to boarding school at 14, because I was going to have to move again, and I asked my parents not to do that. And I went to a school where basically class was sitting around a table, just talking about stuff, all Socratic method stuff. Um, and I was kind of the loudmouth kid who felt the need to like hear himself talk a lot, and to kind of like dominate conversations, because I was young and stupid enough to think that like you won, like if you talk the most, or you proved how smart you are by doing that stuff. So that's the kind of kid I was. I did okay in school. I got good grades, all that stuff. But but yeah, I was a little probably too convinced of my own intellect and too in love with the sound of my own voice. And my wife and my daughters told me they would pay me in high school, and they're probably right. So,
Now I'm going
but
to stop you for 1 second
yeah,
because we're having an audio problem and I don't want
okay,
to lose what you're saying. Is there any chance to turn it up a tiny bit on your side or possibly just have the microphone closer? I don't want to lose the ends of what you're
sure,
saying.
okay.
Perfect.
I can hold the mic right in front of my face, but that's about all I can do. I'm sorry.
Perfect. That's good. That's good.
Sure.
Um, Barbara says, I read you wanted to be a marine biologist at one point. Were you a marine biologist? And
So
she
I
wants
went to
to know,
grad
have you
school.
written any books around the profession, or if not, do you have plans in the future to write them?
Sure. So I say I was a marine biologist. I worked as a scientist. I was a grad student, and I did a bunch of research as a grad student. I started my PhD. I didn't end up getting my PhD because I figured out there weren't enough jobs in science, and so I left science, and that's when I went to law school. Have I written any books in marine biology? No, I have not. I had a pitch out to several publishers for a marine biology slash shark book because most people see that in my bio and they think that might be interesting. The problem was it ended up the book ends up the stakes in the book are around the global pandemic, and I pitched that in like 2019, and then magically no one wanted to hear about that one again. So I don't think that one's going to get written anytime soon.
That's another thing about the lockbox.
Yeah,
You address the pandemic. You vividly bring that feeling that we all had right at the front.
yeah, that was a very controversial choice, and we can talk about that if you want. But yeah, it's there as setting, right? The book is set in the early days of the pandemic, like a month or two in, but we still didn't know what was going on and what was what. Everyone's running around in masks and don't quite know why, and you're frantically washing your hands and stuff like that. But yeah, I wrote this book in part because I was coming off the Walker series, and the Walker series is all about air travel. And Departure, which was Walker book 3, came out in March of 2020. And so I was at Left Coast Crime when they shut that convention down and
Mm.
basically sent us all home. And then I'm doing events around book 3, and it's all about air travel and stuff, and no one's flying anywhere, and it's like, well, what do I do next? So yeah, I was a big heist movie fan, and so I'm sitting and watching the empty freeways in LA and stuff like that, and I think to myself, yeah, this is a pretty good time to pull off a big crime. Everybody's running around with their faces covered, and the freeways are empty. And so I played with that, and I had a story idea for something like the lockbox that was set during like a California wildfire, like a big wildfire that kind of closed down the state. And I was like, oh, I can take that and I can sort of, you know, squeeze that into this COVID setting. But yeah, it was a controversial choice to do it. Most of my author friends told me I was crazy to do it.
Why?
Their theory, and I don't know that it was wrong based on how long it took to sell the book and stuff, was people aren't going to want to read books about COVID. Everyone wants to read to escape, and
Mm.
the after effects of COVID are going to last for long enough that you're better off either writing a book, the day before COVID happens, so that it's a sense of normalcy and everybody can just forget about it, or set it like far enough in the future that you don't have to worry about it. It was all in the past and no one thinks about it anymore.
I disagree.
Um,
I disagree.
so
I mean, everyone, I can see that point, but I also think, and it's funny, the last few weeks I've had people mentioning to me, different people from different places, mentioning to me that they're surprised that their lives have changed. They're just now realizing that things about them have changed. Like,
yeah,
and somebody said we're not optimistic anymore. It feels like the world's not optimistic, and I think that writing in one form or another tells the truth about who we are and mirrors it back to us. And COVID and what happened to us over the last few years is a big part of who we are.
I
It
agree.
didn't
I
it
agree.
didn't take over the book. I think it made it special. Uh,
Oh, thank you. Thank
yeah.
you. I appreciate that. And I
Okay,
was
so
blushing as you were saying all your nice things about it. Thank you
oh
very
yeah, no, it's I call it as I see it. Call it as I see it. The book was and I can show witnesses. I literally was messaging people. I mean, I won't lie, I was exhausted by the end. I was just like gonna fall on my face, exhausted from just the intensity, but I loved it. I loved
much.
every second of it. And I had a writer I'm going to work with say that they wanted to hear some of my work before they, and is there a book that I'm proud of? And I directed them to your book, which had just come out at the time. And I think they remembered the scene. Well, I don't want to give any spoilers away.
That's okay. That's
It
okay.
was in the water.
Uh-huh.
And I think the quote was, your writing made them breathless.
Oh, that's great.
But so I want to excavate something else. So
Okay.
you've got dreams of being a scientist.
Yeah.
You're a young boy with an affinity for sharks. And so this is like, this speaks to me of somebody that's like, their heart wants to go in a certain direction, of a storyteller, of an avid, you know, a creative. And then you decide, oh, this isn't going to make me a lot of money. I'm just going to become a lawyer. I mean, did you have like a heart yearning for the law, or I'm going to fight for the underdog? Or was it just like,
No.
I need to make a living?
Yeah, it was a very mercenary decision. It was I need to make a living and they'll pay me to do that and I can feed my family and stuff like that. And so it was never look, don't get me wrong. There's things about the law I find interesting
Yeah.
and I think I'm a halfway decent lawyer and stuff. But yeah, it was never a deep, oh, I have this yearning for justice or anything like that. That wasn't me growing up. And it was kind of a running joke among my sort of science friends. It was like, well, if all goes to hell, I'll just go be a lawyer, right? And then it kind of did, and I did. So
And you've got the best audience here, because I guarantee you're talking to hundreds of narrators who probably a good proportion of us have spent our lives doing other things because you had to pay the
okay,
bills and like support the family. And
yeah,
now we're just like, so is that how the writing began? At what point did the writing begin? How do you fit it in being a lawyer? I don't understand.
yeah. Okay, so I'll answer the second one first. The how I fit it in is I do it really early in the morning. So I get up at 4 and I write from about 4:30 to about 7,
Wow.
7:30 every day.
You just lost me on.
Um, and so that's kind of how I do that. In terms of how it came around, it's one of those things. So like I took a creative writing class when I was in high school, and I liked it. And it was one of those things where they encouraged you to like write a little short story and send it off to Ellery Queen magazine or whatever it was. And that was nice and that was interesting. But it wasn't something I thought about doing, professionally, right? And then, when I got to law school, you got to write articles in law school and publish them, like we had journals. And that was interesting. And I liked seeing my stuff in print. And in science, I had liked seeing my articles in print. But writing was always something I think I thought of as a skill rather than a profession. So it was, when I was looking to get out of science, it was like, well, what am I good at, right? You get out a legal pad and you like, say, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm bad at. Okay, I'm a good talker, I'm a good writer, I can research, pretty well. What do those things lead to? Okay, I could be a lawyer. But really the writing, the idea of creative writing and being a fiction writer came around. It was about 20 years ago. My wife and I went on vacation before we had our first child. And I was one of those people where, like, when I went on vacation, I would take 5 or 6 or 7 books and I'd stuff them in my suitcase because this is all like pre-Kindle. And
Yeah,
I'd bring
you're
them with me.
definitely talking to the right audience.
um, and so I just devour books on vacation. And so I was sitting, in a lounge chair, and somebody giving me or recommended John Sanford's Rules of Prey, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is a great thriller. You got to try it." And I started it, and it really occurred to me that I had a high enough opinion of my own writing and law. I was like, okay, I'm a pretty good writer, you know. But then you read a book like that, and you're like, wow, like it's the difference between saying like I'm an okay runner or like I'm Usain Bolt in the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Like the fiction guys are like the Olympians, right? Like that they're just head and shoulders above everybody. And so I thought to myself, wow, like I wonder if I could write like this. I wonder if I tried if I could write a sentence or a paragraph or a page like this. Um, and that's kind of how it started. It was like kind of a challenge to myself. Okay, you think you're so good. Like let's see what you can do. And so let's see if you can write a book and make the pages turn. And write like that. And so I came back, and for 6 months I banged my head against the desk on a plot that I'd come up with. And it was grandiose, and it was like the Tom Clancy books I read when I was a kid. It had like 11 time zones in it, all these intersecting plots, and it was going to be 7,000 pages. Um, and I realized after a while that I was not nearly good enough to write that book. And so I was like, okay, well, I better write something small. So I decided to write what I called my practice novel. And that's I started looking around for what people did as their first books, and so I tried to think about what would be a smaller plot, and then I wrote a book, and then I just followed the advice online. It was like, okay, well, while you try and sell your first book, write your second book. So I did that, and then if the first one doesn't go anywhere, try and sell the second one and write a third one. So I did that, and then it was the third one. By then, I kind of had figured out that I knew what I was doing right. I didn't know what I was doing wrong in terms of like being able to sell it. And so I started doing things like I would bid on like charity auctions for critiques from agents and editors and stuff like that, just to get like real feedback from
Yeah.
publishing people. And eventually I ended up that I got a freelance editor, and I said, okay, don't tell me what's good about it. Tell me everything that's bad about it. Let's fix it. And he looked at my third book, and he was like, I see, something here. And that turned out to be Takeoff. So that was the book that got me my agent and got me my publishing deal and all that stuff. And so that was
You're
it.
chasing yourself. I would argue that's you're an artist. I think
Yeah.
that's when you're an artist, is when you're chasing yourself. And you'll never get there ever. You'll never get there. But that's what I heard in the lockbox. You can
Yeah.
always tell the difference between someone that's floundering, but they don't realize they're floundering. They think that they're the finished product and
Mm-hmm.
this is it, rather than I want to be this, I want to be this, I want to, and there's always another this. And that's I think that's the work of art, writers, actresses, actors, narrators, is that endeavor. And then we hear it. We hear you trying to be your best self when we listen or read your book, and it makes us want to try. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I think. That's what real art, that's what I think you do. You
Oh,
make
thank you.
all of us want to be better because you're pushing yourself to be better.
Oh, that's really sweet. I appreciate that.
I mean, do you feel like that, like you be chasing it for the rest of your life,
Oh
trying to
yeah,
do more
yeah,
and more?
yeah. No, no. Every book is okay. How do I make this one better? How do I
Yeah.
how do I grow? How do I make it different? And this one was, this one was a challenge. They're all a challenge, and they're different, and you never quite know where it's going to go. And most of the writers I know go into their books, petrified, like, okay, I did this before, but can I really do this again? And so yeah, that this one was very scary. Like, honestly, like I love the high genre, and it was like, can I do this? Can I get away with this? Can I do this right? Um, it was scary doing a female protagonist, because I've had female characters before, but not the lead.
Did you have a
Um,
woman? Did you have a woman give you feedback about it? Because it's
oh yeah, no, I had
very,
I had
very clearly,
all female beta readers. That was
yeah.
one of my very specific.
And what about the research for vaults and lock boxes?
Yeah, this one was unique because I wrote it during COVID. And so normally I do a bunch of like live in-person research, like the Walker books, that's all me walking airports and measuring distances and stuff like that. This was very much online, figuring stuff out because I was trapped at home. But yeah, I watched hours and hours of videos of safe crackers and locks and all that kind of stuff.
I love the whole inner. I always say, do you guys, and this is for the other narrators out there, do you ever wonder what would happen if there was an investigation and someone had to look at your internet search? Because for every book we do, I've got guns, I've got how to hide bodies, you know,
Sure.
pronouncing
Well,
vaults.
for the Walker books, this is an aside I've told before. So the third Walker book is a book called Departure, and it's a missing persons case. A person goes missing inside San Francisco Airport, SFO, and so it's like, how can somebody disappear inside a big building filled with cameras, right? And how, what would they be up to? Uh, are they up to no good? Somebody up to no good? That kind of thing. But to do that and get the action all right, I had flown through SFO, but I really needed to know it sort of backwards and forwards. So I spent 2 days, 2 full days in the airport, and the way the terminals link up, I would take like one airplane in, one airline in, because that gets you into a certain section of the airport, and then I would take a different airline out because that would get you to a different section of the airport.
Wow.
But I'm going around and I'm taking pictures of all this stuff, and I've watched a million videos and I know where I think certain things are. Um, and so I tend to take photographs and use photo reference later.
So you're in
Um,
the airport taking photographs of the airport walk these
yes,
days?
yes. Well, and I was taking photos of doors that like you're really not supposed to take photos of,
I bet
and
they
and I know
loved
as I'm
you.
doing it that like, yeah, this is so I'm doing that, and an alarm goes off behind me, and I just hang my head and I'm like, okay, like this, I'm done now. Like who am I gonna call with my one phone call, right? And it turned out it was somebody had walked back the wrong way through security or something that tripped an alarm. But I really, that was the one time doing research that I figured I was going.
I know because don't worry, have them call me. I'll vouch for you. He's a writer. I swear he is.
I
But
appreciate
they'll
that.
trust me.
Right, right.
A quirky question from Barbara. What's a topic you wish you knew more about?
Um, Gosh, that's a great one. Um, I don't know. I like with the eclipse yesterday. I like astronomy is kind of beyond me. Like there's so much math that I really can't fully understand it. And so like I'll watch a movie like Interstellar, and they'll be talking about the black holes and all that stuff that happens, and like it's fascinating and it blows my mind. But the idea like to try and actually understand all that stuff and like really dive into it and
Yeah,
really know it is just like I have a feeling it would be impenetrable.
like a whole lifetime it would take to,
Yeah,
like, you sometimes feel like you wish you had more than one life so you could live out all those parallel lives.
yeah,
Like,
no, exactly.
yeah, I love that. If I had another life, I would be like monologue. I would be like a, well, maybe not all of it, but I would
Yeah,
be I love the strong female protagonist that can kick ass, and I love all that. If I had another life, I would do that. Start getting fit when I was young, not be a couch potato. So, okay, so you didn't tell, so I still need to
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
how did you how did you start, because you're still a lawyer. So
Right.
how did you think, one day did you say, right, I'm going to wake up at 4 in the morning instead of my normal 6, and I'm going to write? And how did that look? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to fit it in different places in different ways, but it was really eventually, I mean, we had kids, like they need stuff, yeah, work needs stuff. So eventually it got to be, when is the time that no one needs me and no one's gonna be looking for me, that I can really just do this for a while. And I need a couple of solid hours to really do it. And I tried at night, and I think what I found was, because I know a lot of writers who write, and I used to be a night owl when I was younger. But I found like at night I was just too tired and my brain wasn't crisp enough to
Mm,
do anything or come up with anything. Um, where I found success was early morning, because if I woke up and I come to the office, and that means I can bang around to get a cup of coffee. That stuff. But really, what I try and do is, the night before I go to sleep trying to think about the book. And so, what am I going to write tomorrow? What scene? What action piece? Whatever. And I go to sleep thinking about that. And then when I wake up, I come in, and I think the hope is that you're still in kind of that like semi
yeah,
dream state
your
where
brain's relaxed,
your brain's really
receptive.
engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just kind of like pours out.
I've heard that you're supposed to, and I tried. Okay. I have a proclivity for reading, listening to thrillers and horror books in order to go to sleep. And so I did try not to do that, because I've heard that it's
Yeah,
really, really healthy to rehearse your next day, like visualize that, which is what you're doing with your book the next day, then right
right.
before you go to sleep. So that's awesome. But I always end up going back and listening to bloody, gory thrillers, and bad habits die. So, okay, so do you have a ritual? Do you get your coffee, have a certain mug, sit down? Do you have something that signals to your brain that, or is it just the act of going into the office and sitting down and this is my time?
Yeah, it's kind of just the action of doing it. I mean, I get a cup of coffee, but it's not in a special mug or anything. I typically, what I do is, I open up the file, I start with the page or two before what I'm going to do today. And so I look at what I did yesterday, page or two that I did the day before. I edit that. So I start at that and I work my way through that, editing that. And then I kind of, when I get to the end of that, I just keep typing. Um, and then you just add on to that, and go as long as you can for as far as.
So how long have you been doing this now, from when you first started writing?
Well, I got the inspiration to start writing when we went away when my wife was pregnant and my older daughter just turned 19. So I've
How
been
much?
doing
How old?
this 19, so about 19 years.
Oh, happy birthday to her. Okay, so tell me the difference between you then and you now as a writer, and like what you've learned and kind of like what you wished you could have known in the beginning. There's so many things I wished I could have told myself when I first started
Oh
this.
yeah, no, it's like everything, right? It's like
But I'm thinking specifically for
yeah,
writers that might be watching this, that could
yeah.
use some inspiration or hacks.
I mean, one of the big sins I kept making, and I have seen it, reported since by freelance editors and other people I know that it's a common sin, is you start in the wrong place. I didn't figure out until my third book, until Takeoff, okay, this is where I need to start the book. And by then, I'd had two books turned down, and I'd had a bunch of a bunch of feedback and a bunch of no's,
What do you mean?
all around the all around the idea that um, it's like you're starting in the wrong place because it's boring. You're like you're not hooking me from the first line. You're not hooking me from the first
Oh,
page. Um, and so when I sat down to write Takeoff, my I said I'm never going to get that feedback again. And so Takeoff starts literally with blood hitting a person's cheek, and it's a gunfight, and it's like mid gunfight, and it's like no one's gonna tell me that this is starting slow. No one is gonna tell me that this is starting in the wrong place, and hurry up and cut to the chase essentially. Um, and every book now since then, it's like, okay, where am I starting, and how is that start going to catch the reader? And so like this book, and anybody else who's read it knows it starts with Mana getting pulled over for speeding. So literally we're cutting through the
yeah,
chase.
immediately you're on edge. Immediate.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm going to ask you to just hold 1 second really quickly. I
sure.
need to, hold on. I have an eye problem, which is why I'm having to like cover my eyes and they're killing me. So I'm going to edit this out. Edit, 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 note to self. Okay, so you've just you've just struck me because that is very much for narrators as well.
Okay.
And sometimes we forget that, but when you do an audition, you have to be in it. You have to be, and that's what Barbara brought up. That's why, as narrators, we have to listen to a few minutes of the previous chapter to stay in it. When I go in and start a book fresh, I almost always, at the end of the first day recording, not any further into the book, because then I know more about the characters and I'm more the character that I want to be. But a lot of times I'll go back and redo the first few paragraphs because I've
Okay.
got the energy going. I mean, there are two schools
Yeah.
of thought that sometimes people think, well, your character has grown. If you go back and read, you're doing it from your character at the end of the book rather than your character at the beginning, which is why I won't do it like 2 days later. But from
Okay.
that first session, once they've warmed up a little, I think that moment of energy of being right there with the reader, the listener, it's the same, really. That is exactly what you did in the lockbox. You're right there immediately.
Hopefully, yeah. That is one lesson I've learned is first line, first chapter. Um, get moving.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so anything else?
Um, I mean, I think I've learned to cut myself off from some of my bad habits. Like I said, I grew up reading a few genres of books. Um, my temptations are to typically have too many characters, to head hop between too many characters, um, plots that are too complex that take like way too long to play out. Um, and I overwrite stuff. I'm a lawyer, and we are used to using 5 words when one will do. And trying to cover every base, right? Aiding and
Yeah,
abetting,
I'm pretty
right?
sure I can crack a vault at this point.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
but that's a
So
good thing for that book because it was necessary, because
yeah,
the detail helped.
yeah. But even just in the word choice in an individual sentence, I always need to go back and sort of trim, and then I'm sure there are readers who are like, oh my god, that Reid guy is way too wordy for me.
No,
Because I
I
am more wordy than some people. Some people are much more sparse with their prose, but that's just my style.
yeah, no, I like to me it's the smart thriller. I like but I'm already a fan, so I'm a bit biased. So, okay,
Thank you.
um, so another quirky question. We've got the queen of quirk here. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you?
I almost died scuba diving. Does that count?
Really? How did that happen?
So I was diving in El Salvador, and I was at 60 feet in super murky water, going down an anchor rope. So like that, they anchor the boat and then go down the rope that's tied to the anchor. And I stop because my ears are sort of plugged, and I stop to clear my ears because as you go down, you need to kind of like inflate your sinuses because of
You
the
have the
pressure.
mask thing on.
Right, you have the mask on, I have regulator on. And I go to clear my ears, and so I stop, and then I go to take a breath, and my regulator stops working. And so you go to breathe in, and there's like nothing. And so I was like, okay. So for about 5 or 10 seconds, I thought, okay, this is it. I'm gonna die right here.
Oh my God.
Um,
Barbara
and
says,
then
yeah, that counts.
um, and then you realize, okay, no, they trained me what to do about this. So I did an emergency ascent. And I took my time and went up at the speed of my bubbles and all that stuff. I kept breathing out on the way up and all the things they teach you to do. But yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah, that is scary. That is. Okay, so this is the thing. So now you're happily writing, you're happily lawyering. You
Yeah.
Are you eventually going to be doing the writing full time, just the writing, or would it feels like you would be bored just doing the one thing? It feels like you do. I mean, do you consider yourself a risk taker?
Um, that's a really interesting question. I think most people don't think I'm a risk taker at all. I'm probably
You
I'm
almost
probably
died
thought of
scuba
as the
diving.
yeah. But no, but in general, I'm very sort of like a five minute first kind of person. But no, like I would love to write full time. It would be great. It would be a dream. Um, there are financial realities around that, given the state of publishing and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and the fact that I have two kids and what college costs and all that stuff. So, um, would I eventually like to do that? Sure. Is that going to happen tomorrow? Probably.
Yeah, so and Barbara says, I'd argue that you are a risk taker. You're an author of thrillers. So it's so you're writing these thrillers. And you have a lot of writer friends. Do you
Yeah.
find yourself helping newer writers often?
Um, Maybe a little. I think it's more. I think it's more established writers kind of all helping each other. Like I trade pages with some people. Um, they're veteran authors that most of them are more experienced than me. But like I don't consider myself to really be like a rookie anymore. So like I consider myself to kind of be established.
No, no,
Um,
you're a successful writer by any term. Why did you use Joseph Reid for your first set of books and then Parker Adams for the lockbox?
that was all publisher decision. Crooked Lane wanted to use a pseudonym for this one. They didn't tell me why. I mean, I would guess that it has something to do with, different character, different environment, the female main versus, male main and stuff like that. Just sort of giving this book a fresh start. But we didn't talk about the why. They wanted to do it. I said sure.
So is it so because you've established yourself as a successful writer, and this
Yeah.
is funny because it's not the way I think it looks. I obviously don't know as much about publishing as I should. Um, but what I've noticed is a lot of writers, they're very successful writers, but then a publisher will take on one set of books and then a different publisher takes on their other set of books. Are they having to then shop their next every book they get? Are they having to again shop it to all the publishers? Because I would think if a publisher took on a first series and it's that successful, they would just want to keep going.
Yeah, I think, and obviously, I have a limited amount of experience. I've been with two publishers and I have four books. But in talking to other people, no, I know super successful authors who have done, say a dozen books with one publisher, and then they give that publisher a book, and that that publisher says, we don't want that one, for whatever
Oh,
reason. And then they go shop that to somebody else, and somebody else publishes it. And I think some of it's a genre thing. Some of it is a fit and, like, audience thing. It just kind of depends. Like Lee Goldberg did. So he was with my first publisher, Thomas and Mercer. He does a ton with them. But his new book, Calico, is sort of a Western. And so he published it with somebody else. But I think that's kind of the way it just kind of goes. The publishers know what they want. So,
and when you work with a publisher, do they ask you to make changes to the book?
oh, of course. Yes, all the time.
Really?
All the
Like,
time.
what if it's a change that I don't want to get you in trouble with the publishers here. Like, I'm just curious in general, not you,
Yeah.
but like writers in general. What happens if a writer, if it's a change that's like significantly changes the book? Do they have any power to say, not really, or?
I've never come across that. I mean, so typically the way the editing process works, in my experience, and caveating this all, but it's just my experience. You turn in the manuscript. The first edit you get back is usually called the DEV edit, or the developmental edit, and that's really when you get sort of substantive comments from your editor about how they feel about the story, and those can really range. I mean, it can be, hey, you need more backstory. Hey, we need another character here. Hey, this subplot isn't working. Hey, the character is great, but they need this, or they don't need that.
And some of that could
Um,
be helpful. Some of that,
oh yeah,
is
no,
really
no. Usually
nice.
the comments are incredibly helpful, and they help sort of point you at things that either you're already kind of suspicious didn't work, or worried about, or it's a genius idea, and you're like, oh my god, why didn't I think of that? I've been fortunate enough. I've never had, a developmental suggestion where I thought, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Usually it's a great idea. Um, but it's a collaborative process. I mean, you know that they have more experience than you, and they've seen a whole lot more books than you. And so, you think about it, and a lot of times it's not, the solutions aren't even all that specific. It's more like, hey, this is a problem, that's a problem, and this drags here or it drags there, or
Yeah, that
we
feels
need
right.
something
That
more
that
there.
feels kind of organic then.
Yeah, and so it's up to you as the writer to sort of organically figure out what the fix is. And so, it's on you. It's on you to solve the problem. They just kind of point at the problem, if that makes sense.
And Jonathan says, and I think I know the answer to this. Jonathan says, do you narrate your own books? But I don't think I think you had the same narrator for your other books. And then I narrate. Did did you independently choose your first narrator, or did the publisher, like they did with
No,
me?
no, it has never been, the choice has never been up to me.
So the publisher,
Yeah, I loved J.D. Jackson, who narrated the Walker
he's
books,
really
and
good. He's got that voice.
he does. But you do too, and you were a fantastic choice for this book, and no, it's one of those things. I don't know a lot of narrators, and the choices that the publishers have made in that are fabulous. So it to me, it's like cover art. It's like, I it's related to the book, but it's I know it's outside my expertise, and so it's like, okay, surprise me, with and they always do, and it's always fantastic and stuff. So.
Oh, I'm not complaining about their choice on the lockbox because it made my year. I was very happy with that one. And also the cover, you bring up the covers. I mean,
Yeah,
that is a cover,
yeah, I love the cover of this book. This book is great.
right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
like so another book in the works?
yeah. I mean, I have two pitches out to Crooked Lane for what would be Mana number two. We'll see. I mean, the Mana number one just came out, a couple of weeks ago. So, the publisher has to decide.
You do know that I'm going to go look up Crooked Lane's email right now and go,
Hopefully.
please, please, please.
Yeah, get all your friends to do it too. Yeah, no, I would love to write more Mama books. I have several ideas of where we could go with her and what she can do. And would love to explore all of that. But a certain amount of that comes down to the audience and the publisher and whether they speak and they want it. Because I have other projects I can do too. But I love Mana, and I went into this hoping that it would be the start of something, but you never know.
It's rare that a male writer can it was from a female's point of view, the entire book. And
Thank you.
that's like
Thank you.
astonishing.
That is
That's
that is
astonishing.
that is music to my ears. That is the highest compliment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, really, really good. I'm a big, big, huge fan, in case you haven't noticed.
Thank you.
So are you not waking up at 4 a.m. now writing, or are you just,
I am. I'm in the weird phase right now where right around publication, there's a ton of stuff to do. Some of it is, bookstore events and, like, a tour, if you want to put tour in quotes. Um, some of it is the promotional stuff like interviews and articles that you gotta write, things like that. And pitching the next one and all that stuff. So I'm about 40,000 words into a different project. Um, I haven't even been writing on that for the last week or two because I've been sort of swamped with other things. But I'm almost always writing. It's just a question of what.
do
And
you have any bad habits? Do you have any like, oh
all the
God, the New Year's resolution that just won't stick every single year? Tell us you've got some cracks here.
like
Give
I'm
us a good
horrible at,
one.
like, no, I'm horrible at everything. Like, I eat all the wrong things. I don't exercise enough. I the juggle of like home and day job and writing, like, it's a lot. Like, it
Yeah.
just is. And I very often feel like I am, robbing Peter to pay Paul in certain respects. And so it's like, okay, I was a really bad writer this week. I need to make it up next week. Or I was a really bad dad this week, so I need to make it up next week. And so it's always juggling that because there's never enough hours a day to do
But do you think
all
you
the
can
things you want.
sustain that? I mean, I'm a workaholic, so I'm only asking you the question that I get
Yeah.
asked. Do you think health-wise and life-wise you can sustain it? I tried work-life balance. I didn't find it enjoyable. So
Um, yeah, I people ask me that, and they've asked me that since the first one. And I don't know. It's one of those things. Like, I hate to predict the future. I hate to say, oh, I can do this forever, and then I keel over
yeah,
tomorrow. Um, but I've done it this far,
yeah.
and it's come out okay. And not everything's perfect, and so I could have done plenty of things better along the way. But yeah, hopefully I can at least keep doing what I'm doing. I'd like to get back to a book a year kind of pace. COVID sort of set me behind. But I like doing that, and I know what that feels like at the speed of
You like
that.
being busy, don't you?
Yeah, one, I really, I love the books, and I love talking about the books. I could do this all day long, like just talk about the story, and I have like a million questions for you because I don't ever get to see your side of the process and hear about your reaction to things, and so that's fascinating to me. But, like, we do these book events and we talk to other authors and bounce what writing is like and story and stuff. I could do that all day.
I know. See, that's the thing. It's funny. I've got to say. Oh, oh, and I've got to ask you the last question. I don't want to forget. So, first, I have to say it was lovely and refreshing. You're the first writer that I'd worked with through a publisher that just like literally just reached out, really friendly, and I was like, and then I remember when I asked you about the call, I was like, a lot of writers get nervous, or you're like, No, I'm not. And
Yeah,
Jonathan
that's not my problem.
says, and Jonathan's in the UK with
Okay.
me. Well, oh, no, not Jonathan's in Ireland.
Okay.
Yeah. So he says, is it nice and warm where you are? I see palm trees fluttering outside your window.
Yeah, yeah. I live in San Diego, so Southern California. Um, Today it's about like 65, 68, something like that. So there's a breeze. Yeah, if you opened my shades and stood and looked the right way, you could see the ocean. So yeah, I live in a very semi-tropical kind of place.
Proper summertime. Proper
Yeah, we're
summer.
getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah. Okay. So I hit everyone with this one at the end.
Okay.
For the YouTube audience that's going to be watching this in the next 100 years or so, if they were to take anything away from this call, writers and narrators, anything at all, a piece of advice, what would you want them to walk away with?
I mean the pieces of advice that I've gotten that have really that have stuck with me and sort of served me well. Um, one is you have to finish, and a lot of people get hung up on that step. Um, you can work on a manuscript and just work it, work it, work it, work it, and never show it to anybody. And that's sort of a psychological crutch of I don't want to be judged. I don't want to, I can't. I'm not ready to sort of hear
Yeah.
the feedback on it. Um, and 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 that kind of feeds into so you have to finish so that you be judged on it, have it be judged. And then the second thing is and this is where I try and take writing and help my kids. Um, you know, so much of like what we psychologically want or psychologically need is like the compliments and like the good stuff and because it feels real nice. But I started getting better as a writer and really I really turned the corner as a writer when I stopped wanting to hear all the good things and I really just wanted to hear the bad things. I remember sitting down with one of my first editors and they started out with a bunch of sugar to sort of help the medicine go down and I kind of interrupted them. I'm like, look, I love everything you're saying. I want to, part of me wants to hear all the great things that you love about the book, but what I really need to hear are all the things that don't work. And that's what I really want to focus on because I want this to be the best it can be. And so it's turning the corner and getting yourself to a place where you can say, okay, tell me everything that doesn't work so that then I can fix it. Um, and that's where I think the real work is and the real creativity is. But you have to be open to it. You have to be ready for that because it can be hard. And it's I get the editorial letter from my editor. It's like here's all the things wrong with it. I have to read it and then I have to set it down. I have to walk away. I have to come back to it. And sometimes I read it like little chunks because it can be a lot to take and can, hit your ego pretty hard. But at the end of the day, you have to be open to that. You have to take those things in and you have to wait and say, okay, what do I do about this? Is this a good criticism? Something I should do something about? Is it not? Is it something that like I put this in there for a reason, and it is what it is, and it should stay. And some of that is taste, and some of that is voice, and that's the judgment that comes with the this a little bit. But I think just for all creatives, if you're out there and you're struggling, I think run towards the criticism because that's what will help you.
Do you know what you made me? I had an email conversation with someone earlier tonight before this call, and I just made a connection. You just said something, and I think it ties to what you said earlier in the call. You said earlier about you were chasing yourself. You're the game became about improving yourself, the game became about someday getting to so it stopped being about, oh, I think I'm pretty good, the ego based, the seeking of validation from the editors, the And it's funny because somebody was talking to me about, I was going to do a project, and we were talking about, and I have 100% faith in this project, and there's more for me sometimes than the bottom line. How many numbers and likes does this person have, and what is the payroll up front? Because there are other levels, right? There's
Sure.
the creativity, the being proud of something you've done, the chance to challenge yourself and do something that's just like, you're like, I can do that. And you're hearing the different characters like, I know that they would be what's their motive before you've even gotten the gig, right? And it's all the same thing, isn't it? I think the point in someone's career, it makes so much sense. It's that point in your career where it stops being about the career and it starts being about the game of chasing that like thing. You don't know what it is, but you want it and you know you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're challenging yourself. And that's what you've done. You're not seeking validation, external validation. That's why you're asking for the hard feedback, because that's going to get you closer to your goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, the hourly rate, yes, of course we have to make a living and be good business people, but I could become the best business person in the world, and that's not going to get me to that place I want to get to,
Right.
as an
Right.
artist. I know it sounds woo woo or woohoo or whatever that word is, but that's what we're all in it for, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, there were times right before I got published where I was trying to get published and struggling, and I think you have to have a conversation with yourself about where is this going, and do I keep doing it, and or not? And every writer I know has that conversation with themselves at one point or likely at multiple points. Um, and there was something where it's like I started doing it with zero chance of getting published, like with just zero um, zero stake in the outcome. I just wanted to do it, see if I can do it. And I think you have to have that attitude, and then if you have some success, and I'm fortunate enough to have a little success, then you have to say, well, I got into this before that was ever like a thing, and so
Yeah.
I'm doing it because I love doing it. I'm not doing it because
You circle back
that's right.
around to
Right.
to your why.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can hear it in your writing. You can hear it in
Oh,
every single sentence of that book. I can't, I
oh,
can't,
that's great.
I can't say it enough. I can't find, and I am normally, okay, I fast forward through the action scenes on shows. I'm like that person, but your book transcended.
I was gonna say there's a lot of action scenes in my book, so
It was all action. It was like 10 hours of action, but it was so well written. And you were in the character. You were the characters. So it's like I was there. I was there for the ride.
hey,
I still
that's
fast
all we
forward
can
through
ask.
all the love scenes in movies now because it's waiting for the book to come along that cures me of that. But the action scenes, I'm now good with, thanks to the lockbox. Joseph, it was an honor. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been great. I've never gotten to have a conversation with the person who's done the narration of the book like this. And so hearing your angle on it, and hearing the questions you have and stuff like that, that to me is just fantastic. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd give you the hard feedback, but there wasn't any. The thing's perfect. It is. So thank you so much. Write more. Your audience wants it.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone. Mwah. Thanks for joining. Bye, Joseph.